I have had people ask me what a death doula is, and I've decided to put together a little video to try and explain what a death doula is and how we can be of service. So, before I start with that, there is a quote that I absolutely love that has to do with death and dying. It's from Benjamin Franklin. Our new Constitution is now established. Everything seems to promise it will be durable. But in this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes. I find that funny that he talks about death as being a certain inevitability that you cannot overcome. And what I find very interesting about that is that in our current society, death is no longer considered to be a rite of passage. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But first, let's circle back. What is a death doula? A death doula is a non medical person who is trained to care for someone holistically, meaning physically, emotionally, and spiritually at the end of their life. A death doula can enrich the dying experience while strengthening the relationship between the medical team and the family or the caregivers. Doula client relationships engage the difficult and complex emotions while navigating all of the signs and symptoms of the dying process. Doulas strive to be a support system for those who are terminally ill or elderly, and for their families as well, as they plan for the transition from this life to the next life. Doulas are an active part of the death positive movement, which is a social and psychological movement that encourages people to speak openly about death, dying, and everything in between. So, why do we need doulas? Well, in order to understand that, we need to go back and look at how the funeral industry has evolved over the last century. So, prior to the 20th century, funerals were organized by family and neighbors. They were held at the home of the deceased person, usually in the parlor, and the burials were often on family property. In the early 20th century, funeral homes were established. Funeral homes provide caskets, embalming, cremation, and if needed, the final ceremony. And burials started to be taking place in cemeteries instead of family plots or family land. Because of the evolution in the funeral industry, the rite of passage of death and dying has pretty much been erased. So if you think about a rite of passage, it can be, well, how do we want to say this? So if you think about a rite of passage, a rite of passage is usually a ceremony or an event that marks an important stage in a person's life. Could be your birth, your school graduation, a wedding, retirement. For me, being a child of the 80s, it was getting my driver's license. For some people right now, it's getting their first cell phone. Funerals are also a part of this rite of passage. But what's not in here? What's not included in a rite of passage is the actual process of dying. A lot of people that are going through the process of dying are put in nursing homes or hospitals, and the family sometimes has more of a hands-off approach, and they trust whatever the doctors or the caregivers are saying, and they lose their voice, they lose their say. And death doulas are an active part of bringing back that say, that voice to the person and the family that is going through this dying process. So let's talk a little bit more about the doula care model, if you will. So, as I said, we are non medical support. We're also non judgmental. We don't care what your religious affiliation is. You could be a Catholic or a Muslim or Jewish or whatever. It doesn't matter to us. We're not going to judge you for your religious beliefs, whether you have them or you don't have them. We also offer a family centered approach. So if your family is actively involved in your life, we will include them in some of the decision making process. And it is a holistic care. We are focused on mind, body, and spirit, the whole package, not just a piece of it. We empower the person that is going through this transition to allow their voice to be heard. And we work with the other members of the team, including the hospice, the doctors, nurses, caregivers, and even the funeral homes if needed. So, how are death doulas different from funeral directors or hospice workers? Funeral directors interact with families, generally speaking, after the death of the loved one, not before the death. Hospice workers, they provide medical care for the person that's going through this transition. Doulas can be present anytime before, during, or after the death of a loved one. We work in conjunction with hospice programs to provide interpersonal, social, logistical, and if needed, spiritual guidance that complements the care they are receiving from hospice. Doulas fill the gaps. Doulas can step into other areas where hospice and funeral homes may not be able to help, such as advanced healthcare planning. Do you have advanced healthcare planning? Have you thought about advanced healthcare planning? If you've not thought about it, we're going to encourage you to think about it. How do you want your process of dying to behave or act? Do you want your family or your doctors to go through extraordinary measures to keep you alive? Is that important to you? If it is, we're going to honor that. We're going to help you set that up. And on the other hand, if you don't want your family or your doctors to go through extraordinary measures to keep you alive, we will also help you put that in writing and have that known so that your wishes are honored. We can also provide practical training for family caregivers in how to help care for their family members. We can create a plan for support in the patient's time of death. So, what do I mean by that? When we get close to the end of death, it can become very intense for the family and caregivers. And doulas can step in and offer support or relief during this time. Do you need to sleep? Do you need to shower? Do you need to go to the grocery store? We can step in and help. A funeral home is not going to be able to step in and help in that manner. Hospice helps as best they can, but they can't always step in and help to the same extent that a death doula can. We can help with planning your funeral or your memorial services. And we can be companion to the person going through the process. We can be there to hold their hand, keep them company when family or caregivers are not available. And as I said, we give relief that is much needed to the caregivers or the family during this time. We can also offer grief support, and we can have a visual presence for an actively dying person, meaning when they are actively going through that dying process, we can sit there with them and honor them by following their death vigil, if you will. Sometimes we have to have conversations with the patients regarding their illness so that we have an understanding as well as them as what their prognosis is, what their condition is. So we may outright ask them, do you understand what your condition is and what your prognosis is? Do you have any fears or worries about what lies ahead? What goals do you have as your time gets close? And what are you willing to trade off or sacrifice or go through to have more time if that's important to you? All of these things need to have an opportunity to be talked about should the person going through the dying process want to have those conversations. And again, we're going to offer support in planning ahead, advanced directives. Have you made an advanced directive on the treatment you want or don't want? Can we help you facilitate that? Do you have a living will? Can we help you facilitate that? Do you have your power of attorney for healthcare set up? Can we help you facilitate that? And do you have a do not resuscitate order? Can we help you with that? These things are ways for the voice of the patient that is going through the dying process to be heard so they can set up their directives so family members are not keeping them alive if the patient doesn't want to be kept alive at the end of their life. Or, on the other hand, the sacrifices or the trade-offs that they're willing to make should they choose that they do want more time. Whatever that person wants, we will help them facilitate and step in where we can to make sure that their voice is heard. And you heard me talk about a vigil. So what do I mean by a vigil? So a vigil is at that time where the body is actually shutting down. Does that person, does that loved one want to have music playing when they're going through that process? Do they want to have family present? If they want some family and not other family, who do they want there and who do they not want there? Do they want to have any aromatherapy there? Maybe they want to have a little lavender for relaxation. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're sensitive to smell. Maybe they want to have religious music playing. Maybe they want to have some good old rock and roll music playing. Who knows? But whatever they want, we're going to have those conversations about what you want to have going through that process. It's similar to how a woman would plan her birth process. So, do you want to have a water bath birth? Do you want to go through Lamaze? Do you know what are these things that the women want to do when they have birth? Now we're giving that same opportunity to the person going through their death process. What do you want to experience? How do you want your death to look and feel? So sometimes when we talk about end of life, there can be a lot of legal jargon that comes into play. And if we get into that area where there's a lot of legal jargon coming into play, we are going to recommend you talk to a lawyer. We are not medical people, we are not legal people, but we can help point you in the direction of someone that can help you. So we can be a resource to help get you the assistance that you need, whether it be legal assistance or even medical assistance if needed. We can be an advocate for you. So then there's other things for the family to think about that a death doula could become involved in, such as the after death care. So, when do you call 911? Do you know? When do you call 911? If a person is in hospice care, you do not need to call 911. Instead, you're going to call the hospice nurse, and the hospice nurse will come to the home and they will pronounce time of death. If the person is not in hospice care, that's when you need to call 911. If the person has a do not resuscitate order or a DNR, it is helpful to have that on hand when you do call 911. And you can also request that the rescue squad or the ambulance does not use sirens so that they come to your home quietly without the lights flashing and the sirens blaring. And then we can also help to educate or assist with the body disposition. So when the loved one is going through the process, we may ask, what do you want to happen to your body after you're gone? Do you want to donate it to science research or medical research? Do you want to donate any of your organs? Do you want embalming of your body to delay that decay in your body? What about cremation? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to go in the ground? Do you want to go in a crypt? We can have all of these kinds of conversations. Plus, there is something called a green burial. So if you've never heard of a green burial involves placing the body into the earth in the most natural and environmentally friendly way possible. So they may not go into the ground in a coffin and a crypt. They may go in the ground in a blanket or a cotton cloth and covered with the dirt. So this is an option that a lot of people don't even know about for being buried if you are very earth conscious about uh, the environment, or environmentally conscious, I guess is how I want to say that. So some of the other ways that a death doula can come into play and help is we can help plan in advance or even after um, services and remembrances. So sometimes the person that is going to be transitioning, they have a say on what they want their funeral or their remembrance or memorial service to look like. And we can help them in pre-planning that. Or on the other side, we can help the family with planning that if the family gets involved after the death of the loved one. So, do you want to have your service in a funeral home? Do you want to have your funeral at your own home? Did you know you could do that? You don't have to have a funeral home perform your service or your embalming or anything like that. You could actually have a funeral in your home. A lot of people don't even know that's an option anymore. You could have a living funeral, which is a pre-funeral, if you will. So you're not even dead. You're there. You're participating in your funeral before you pass on. There's also wakes and viewings and visitations and different options like that that are available. So these are the kinds of questions or conversations that a death doula would have with the person who is going through the death process or preparing to go through the death process. We want to bring back the act of dying as a rite of passage because death deserves the same amount of care, thought, and support that birth does. I hope you have found this helpful. I hope I have answered some of your questions about what a death doula does. And if there is anything else I can be of service for you or your family, please reach out and I am happy to assist you in whatever way I can concerning the death process, the dying process, and your family or yourself. I send you so much love and blessings. Namaste.